Hi, this is Emily with Park Street, and I'm here today with Doug Epstein, the Director of Regional Sales for Horizon Beverage, a wholesaler in 5 states in the Northeast. Doug, thanks for being here today.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, so start off with a little bit of background on Horizon.
We're a wholesaler and broker of wine, spirits, and beer in the 5 New England states. Headquarters are in southeastern Massachusetts. I represent the 4th generation of our business, and we service all channels, on-premise and off-premise, national accounts, independent retail, and control states.
All right, so a lot of our viewers are going to be newer, younger brand owners. So let's just start with some general advice that you have on how they approach a new distributor.
Well, there are many best practices for new suppliers coming into a distributor world. First thing is, do your homework on the distributor. Understand their organizational structure, understand the appropriate personnel, the areas they cover, and who you need to get together with to be truly successful. You can't just drop the hot potato in the lap of the wholesaler. You got to sort of say, look, this is my strategy to work within your wholesalership. These are the sales divisions or the specialists, the portfolio managers that can best accomplish my goals. Get me this. You got to understand how a wholesale operates. I've yet to see a new supplier come in and say, can I look at your org chart and understand it before I meet with you? I like to understand where you're going, where you're putting your resources as a wholesaler, and how I can best align with that.
Without necessarily name dropping, can you give an example of someone who came in recently that had it all together and what they showed you and what they did?
I don't know if there is one, because there's so many other facets to it. As a new supplier, when you meet with the wholesaler for the first time, obviously you want to talk about the authenticity of your brand, the reason for being. You can't come with a brand and just say, hey, here it is. The world doesn't need any more brands.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of Me Too products out there. If you're just another Chardonnay at $9.99 or another tequila from Mexico, nobody cares. Unless you get a story, unless you have a reason, point of differentiation. What's your point of differentiation? If you can't explain it to me in a couple minutes or less, how are you going to explain it to the consumer? How are you going to explain it to the sales forces? How do you get people excited about it? It only has to be 2 or 3 things. But if there's something special about your product, the reason for being, I call it, some people refer to as a point of differentiation, then you got something. Then you get something you can gravitate towards.
All right. Can you talk a little bit about what you're paying attention to, what kind of trends are happening within the industry or even on a consumer level that is interesting to you?
I think products more and more are specialized. Consumers have special interests. So to have a broad-based product to say, hey, here's a tequila at this price point, that's not a selling strategy anymore. Here's a tequila designed for these type of people in these type of accounts or this type of channel to create that spark, to get that foothold. That's all you need as a new supplier. I often refer to it as, you got to start the spark, and it spreads like a fire or like a cancer, like a disease, an organization. And it's true. As a new supplier, you really can't rely on the wholesaler to do a lot of the legwork to do that spark. The wholesaler really takes that spark and fans those flames. So you as a supplier say, okay, do I have the manpower? Do I have the strategy, whether it be through social media or whatever, to create that spark, to create that call, to create that excitement and education about the product in the marketplace? So I often caution new suppliers, don't just start in Florida and say, okay, I'm ready for the country.
Yeah.
You got to do it state by state. It costs a lot of money to ramp up an organization, just like it costs a lot of money to ramp up production. They all seem to know that. They get how much it costs to put the product in the bottle because they've had to go to the bank and borrow money for that. What they don't get is the cost associated with ramping up states. What you need to do is solidify your base and build from there. When you look at the great successes in the industry, Tito's, Captain Morgan, Patron, not a single one of those was an overnight success. They built, they grew, had a base, They went from there. And eventually, they got national distribution. Unfortunately, a lot of new suppliers are a little too eager. And either they run out of money, they can't fully support those states. And you get one chance to make a first impression. So if you enter a state and you don't do so well, you don't have the support there, you're dead the next time around. The sales force, the wholesalers moved on to another product. You get one chance to make a first impression. You're better with a slow build. You better have lower expectations and exceed them than have high expectations and fall short. But it's really, the onus today is on the supplier to create that spark, I'm not abdicating the responsibility of the wholesaler, but we fan the flames of what the supplier does, because the supplier knows the intrinsics of the brand better than anybody else. And they have to be able to tell that story and communicate that to the consumers and ultimately to our sales force.
Sure. Can you talk about pricing trends a little bit? What do you see happening in pricing? Do you see most people getting it, or new brands getting it right? And if they're getting it wrong, how do they evaluate it?
Pricing trends. That's a good question. I think when it comes to pricing trends, what I find new suppliers should do is a survey of the marketplace and understand what the competitive set is. They often say in terms of taste profile, this is what we're like. But they don't look at the price and what the shelf price is in that given marketplace. That's extraordinarily relevant to my people as they're doing program and planning. Some of those brands may be ours, some of those brands may be our competition's. But once again, the supplier comes in to see us, doesn't take the time to go in the market, survey, look around, see what the shelf price is on the competitive set they so designated. It says to the wholesaler, you're not really into it. You're not willing to do the legwork. You're not willing to really analyze the marketplace and see where you should be. Another best practice for new suppliers is to pre-sell. Wholesale is nothing better than have some product already sold. Once again, I'm not talking about doing the legwork for the wholesaler in general terms, but if you can get 2, 3, 4, 5 accounts pre-sold that are significant in nature, that are behind the brand, you bring that to any wholesaler, well, we're excited. Because when we buy that inventory, we're not concerned about if it's too much over time. We're concerned that it just doesn't move. That's the biggest concern of a wholesaler, is that the brand is just dead.
Yeah.
If it's slow, it's not a concern. We've got all good cash flow. It's not a problem. We can sit on the inventory for a given amount of time.
A complaint that I hear a lot from small, inexperienced guys is, oh yeah, I sold my inventory, to the wholesaler, and then they just sat on it. Is that just a miscommunication? They don't understand that pre-selling is what they should be doing, essentially?
Pre-selling is one technique in that regard. It's not going to eat up all the inventory. I think it's interesting to say your comment that the wholesaler just sat on it. I can assure you, no wholesaler wants to sit on inventory, because that inventory is literally cash. It's just sitting there, not gaining interest, perhaps declining in value every day goes by. So we do want to move it through. The question is, in today's day and age of consolidation, you got to look at wholesalers who've got the capacity to manage those brands, to push it through the system, to get focus from the sales forces. At the same time, there's a part to play for the supplier as well. If they're located, a 5-hour, airplane ride away, how often they be in front of the sales force versus having local people? Once again, it goes back to that organizational structure. And do you have the capacity? Do you have the personnel to drive that business? So you're better off staying more localized, building that base before we begin to expand out. So you have the cash flow volume to service human resource needs in opening markets that on themselves can't really satisfy dedicated personnel. So there's no such thing as wholesale sitting on inventory. That's antithetical to what we do. You don't understand that it's sitting there because of other issues. And it could be a myriad of issues, but you have to address that. You can't just let it sit there either. The questions come up, why? What's happening with that? It's not that we don't want to sell it. We want to sell everything we can.
Yeah.
Why is it not selling? There could be a bunch of issues. Some the wholesalers, some the suppliers, some the marketplace. And we have to recognize each one of those.
What would you advise? What's the best way to stay top of mind?
Well, I think that varies by wholesaler. Horizon Beverage, we're extremely open with our smaller suppliers, great transparency and access. We're still a relatively small family-run business, and a lot of our growth is being driven by smaller secondary suppliers versus the larger multinational conglomerates.
Okay.
But I think a good practice is in your first meeting, what are the expectations? Ask the question. How often can I come for sales meetings? How often can I make myself present? When do you want to hear from me? Who needs to hear from me? Who in your organization needs to have my touch points? And I think clarification right up front sets the stage. And life is not about sales meetings. Sometimes those are the most unproductive moments.
Yeah.
We have Friday sales meeting. We always encourage our suppliers to hang around on Fridays, around the sales rooms, when they're not in the sales meeting. So much happens in the hallways. And we welcome them with open door policy. Come in, hang around, because we want that intermingling. I think you have to recognize a small supplier. You're not going to get on the priority list.
Right.
You're not going to get a quota, MBO, whatever the vernacular is, whatever the system is. Contractually, those are eaten up a lot by the major suppliers. But as a wholesaler, our job is to figure out how do we engage all of our suppliers. That's what we do at Horizon Beverage. That's where our growth is coming from. That's how we incentivize our people, quite frankly, is to focus on the smaller suppliers, knowing that's where the growth comes from. We may be unique in that regard. I've heard some challenges with other wholesalers around the country, but I think setting those expectations up front. And then when you do communicate, what are you communicating about? Are you just asking for the same report over and over again? Are you just complaining? Or are you bringing productive, constructive ideas, thoughts?
Yeah.
Are you doing long-winded emails? Or are you doing short ones? We all get a lot of emails.
That's a good point.
Brevity is treasured. And I think that, what you want to talk about, wins in other markets, things happening, good news. Everybody likes to get good news.
Mm-hmm.
Big scores made across the country. Here's some interesting data from IRI and Nielsen I want to send to you to share with your team. All that kind of positivity is, I think, always welcome. It's the negative side of things. You're not doing a good job. Why is this? I don't understand. Those aren't generally well received from most wholesale executives that are getting 100 emails a day.
Yeah.
You got to recognize that. And where do you stand on pecking order? So how do you stand out? Bring good news. Tell us what's happening in other markets. Best practices. Share best practices. I don't know any supplier that really does that very well, big or small, from around the country. We operate predominantly in Massachusetts. If you got a big hit in Georgia, tell us why. What did they do right there? What's the secret sauce? We want to know, because we want to move that inventory.
Yeah.
We want to sell. We're in business to sell.
Okay. Well, Doug, thank you so much for being here today. It was such a pleasure to have you.
Great to be here.